It's ghoulish. That's the only word that can explain Prince Harry and Meghan Markle sharing a private picture of their so-called private children, Archie and Lily, on their so-called private vigil to lay flowers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with them taking the photo for their family and for the children, right? That's not my issue.
Just posting it.
It's posting it.
On the 23rd of July, 2026, Meghan posted an Instagram carousel with two simple words as the caption, "Summer Holiday," and one image inside that carousel is the one everyone is still talking about. It shows Prince Harry, 7-year-old Archie, and 5-year-old Lilibet, all photographed from behind, walking away down a tree-lined path. Harry and little Archie appear to be carrying large bouquets of flowers. The location, according to British Vogue, is Althorp, the Spencer family estate, the place where Diana, Princess of Wales, has rested since 1997. And here is the first thing that has to be said clearly, because the headlines have been sloppy about it. That photograph does not show Diana's grave. It does not show the burial island. It does not show the headstone, the memorial temple, or Meghan standing anywhere near any of it. What you actually see is the backs of a father and two children on a path lined with trees. So let us be precise about what is real here. British Vogue identifies the setting as Althorp and says a grave visit was likely. LBC uses careful language too, saying it appears the family visited. The flowers make a memorial visit plausible. They do not confirm it inside the frame. Reports also say the family stayed as guests of Earl Charles Spencer, Diana's brother. Nobody trespassed. Nobody snuck in. The visit itself was entirely legitimate, which means the line that got crossed is not the one the clickbait wants you to think. Nobody is accusing Meghan of photographing a grave she was banned from seeing. The issue is something quieter and, honestly, more revealing.
I would now use Charles Spencer's words directly to describe the acts of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. You too are insane and ghoulish. You too have no respect for Princess Diana's resting place. And also all of us who have to put up with your constant briefings about privacy. And then you post the most intimate photos that we have never seen of members of the royal family unless they've been taken by paparazzi.
Visiting Althorp was allowed. Turning a private memorial context into public Sussex content, published to an audience of millions with a breezy holiday caption, is the judgment call that set everything off. Because Althorp is not an ordinary field. Historic England's Registered Park and Garden record states plainly that Diana was buried in 1997 on an island in the middle of a lake called the Oval, within the grounds. A memorial temple stands on the bank. The island setting was chosen deliberately, water separating the resting place from the world, giving the family a kind of privacy that very few graves on Earth are built to provide. That is the emotional weight sitting underneath a post-captioned summer holiday. And once you understand that weight, the pattern behind it starts to matter far more than one photograph. Because this is not the first time a casual, lifestyle-flavored image from Meghan has ended up fused to the most painful chapter of Diana's story. There is Paris. There is Harry's own recreation of his mother's final drive. There is a memoir that took the reader right to the graveside. There is a Netflix series. And there is one very specific line that Prince William drew in public, out loud, that later got stepped over anyway. That last one is the real collision, and it is documented, not guessed at. So the question that hangs over everything else is simple. If the image itself is less explicit than the screaming headlines suggest, why can it still do damage to a brotherly relationship that is already broken? The answer is not in the pixels, it is in the pattern, and the pattern is the story. Here is the contradiction that makes this particular post land the way it did.
According to Taz, saying you have to admit this is pretty sickening. The holiday pictures are fine, but to take photos of the children carrying flowers on their way to lay them at Diana's grave is not something that should be shared with the public like a fun day out. It's ghoulish. It's more than that, it's vulgar.
During the same broader trip, there were two family moments. One was protected with almost surgical care, the other went to Instagram. Vanity Fair reported that King Charles's reunion with Harry and the Sussex family was organized privately, kept tightly held, and released without a single photograph. According to that reporting, the participants wanted the meeting to stay private, and Harry personally assured his father that he would not discuss it publicly. No carousel, no caption, no visible bouquets. A moment between a father and a son that everyone involved agreed to keep out of the feed. Then, during that same window, a holiday carousel goes up, and inside it is the Althorp image. One family moment gets walled off from the public entirely. The other, set at the most sensitive location tied to Diana's memory, becomes shareable content with a 2-word caption. Same trip. Two completely different standards for what stays private. Now, the point here is not to invent a motive. There is no evidence that Meghan chose Althorp to profit, or to embarrass Charles, or to break some explicit agreement. That is not the claim, and it would not be fair to make it. What the contrast does show is a selective sense of privacy. When the family decided a moment with the king had to stay off the record, it stayed off the record. When it came to a walk at the place where Diana is buried, the instinct went the other way, toward publication. And that is worth sitting with, because privacy is not supposed to work like a dial you turn up and down depending on the aesthetic. Either these are private family experiences, or they are content. The Highgrove reunion says the family knows exactly how to protect something when it wants to. The Althorp Post says that same discretion did not apply to the ground where Diana rests.
During a joint documentary marking the 20th anniversary of Princess Diana's death, Prince William explicitly stated on behalf of both brothers that they would never speak so openly or intimately about their mother in public again. That vow has been broken over and over again.
Let me be fair to the other side of it, because it matters, and then we move on. Earl Spencer hosted them. The family were invited guests. Visiting Althorp was completely legitimate, and there is nothing wrong with Harry bringing his children to the place his mother is buried. Nobody sensible disputes any of that. The children walking a path with flowers, in and of itself, is a tender thing. But tenderness in private and tenderness broadcast to millions are not the same act. The moment it goes to Instagram, it stops being only a family visit and becomes a public statement, whether that was the intention or not. And the timing, right alongside a reunion everyone else agreed to protect, is what turns a sweet holiday snap into a question about judgment. So which instinct is the real one? The one that protected the king, or the one that published Diana's memorial context? Because you cannot fully claim both. And this is not the first time ordinary lifestyle imagery from Meghan collided with Diana's most painful geography. There was an earlier one, and that one happened in the last place on earth you would want a casual video filmed. Roll the clock back to October 2025, Paris Fashion Week. Meghan posted an Instagram story filmed from the back seat of a limousine, her feet up on the seat, the city sliding past the windows. It looked like 1,000 other influencer travel clips. Relaxed, glossy, unbothered, and it detonated. Because of where it was. Contemporary reports identified the bridges visible in the footage as Pont Alexandre III and Pont des Invalides. Pont d'Alma, and the tunnel where Diana died in 1997, sat nearby along the same stretch of the Seine, either close by or further along that route depending on which account you read. Critics called the imagery insensitive. A woman relaxing with her feet up in the back of a limousine, gliding through the very part of Paris tied forever to Diana's death. Now here is where the internet ran off the road, and the correction matters. A lot of the loudest versions of this story claimed Meghan filmed inside the tunnel where Diana died, or posed at it, or recreated the crash. That is false, and it needs saying plainly. The footage does not place her inside that tunnel. A Sussex representative and sources supporting Harry rejected the whole interpretation and said Meghan did not pass close to the tunnel at all. So no, she did not film in the tunnel. She did not enter it. She did not target it. The precise proximity is genuinely disputed. But strip away the exaggeration and you are still left with something real. A casual, feet-up, lifestyle video, filmed in Paris, in the exact part of the city that carries the heaviest possible Diana association, published to millions. The tunnel version is a lie. The judgment problem underneath it is not. And that is the thread worth pulling. Twice now, we have the same shape, an everyday piece of Sussex lifestyle content, the kind of thing anyone posts, ends up welded to the worst day in Harry's life. Once in Paris, near the crash route, once at Althorp, at the burial ground. Neither image on its own shows anything forbidden. Both, in context, land like a thumb pressed on a bruise. The defenders say it is coincidence that a person cannot travel through Paris or visit family land without the ghost of Diana being dragged into it. Fair enough as far as it goes, but there is a difference between being somewhere and publishing yourself being somewhere. The first is life. The second is a choice about what becomes public. And when the pattern repeats, at exactly the locations most saturated with grief, the coincidence explanation starts to wear thin. Here is what makes the Paris episode cut even deeper though. That stretch of road was not emotionally neutral background to Harry. It was not just a place he had read about. Harry had already gone there himself, deliberately, and done something with it that tells you precisely how much weight that tunnel carries in his own mind. Harry told this story himself, in his own words. During a trip to Paris in 2007, he asked his driver to take him through the Pont d'Alma tunnel. Not just to pass through it, but to travel through it at roughly 65 miles per hour, the reported speed of Diana's car in the moments before the fatal crash. He wanted to feel it. He hoped that going through the tunnel at that speed might somehow give him closure, some understanding of what those final seconds were like for his mother. He later described that decision as terrible, a mistake, something that did not bring the peace he was chasing, but sit with what it means. This is a man who was so haunted by the specifics of how his mother died that he reconstructed the drive, matched the speed, and put himself through the tunnel to try to close the wound. The Associated Press describes Diana's death and Harry's grief over it as central to his memoir, Spare. This is not background trauma for him. It is the center of gravity. And to be scrupulously fair, none of that means Meghan knew the route her limousine took in 2025, or that she intended to trigger her husband, or that she was reenacting anything. There is no evidence for any of that, and it would be wrong to imply it. But it does explain why the Paris video was never going to be received as just a travel clip by the people who understand what Paris means to Harry. That geography is soaked in his grief. Now here is where the memoir becomes the real turning point, because Harry did not keep his mother's grave private either. In Spare, he described bringing Meghan to Diana's burial island around the 25th anniversary of Diana's death. He wrote about placing flowers, about speaking privately to his mother, and then about giving Meghan time alone at the grave. He described coming back to find Meghan kneeling, her eyes closed, her hands pressed against the stone. According to Harry, Meghan later told him she had been praying for clarity and guidance. Read that again and think about what it is. That is one of the most intimate imaginable moments, a private prayer at the graveside of the husband's dead mother, and it was written into a memoir that sold millions of copies around the world. That is the precedent that matters. An intensely private graveside moment at the exact island inside Althorp we are talking about became commercial storytelling, not leaked by a tabloid, not stolen by a photographer, placed into a book, willingly, by the family itself. And I want to hold the boundary here because it is important. Harry is the one who disclosed those details. He wrote them. There is no basis to claim Meghan demanded her prayer be included, or staged it for the page, or controlled the manuscript. That is not the accusation. The accusation is simpler and harder to dodge. The graveside at Althorp had already been converted, once, from a private moment into published material. So when a new Althorp image appears in 2026, it is not landing on blank ground, it is landing on a track record. The grave, though, is only one piece of a much bigger construction. Because when you step back and look at the whole body of Sussex media, Diana is not just remembered in it, she is load-bearing. She keeps getting used to supply the one thing a new story cannot generate on its own, which is history, legitimacy, and danger. Start with the Oprah interview in 2021. That was the big one, the interview that reset the whole relationship with the institution. And Diana was in the room, symbolically and literally. Harry said on camera that his greatest concern was history repeating itself, directly connecting Meghan's treatment to what happened to his mother. And Meghan wore a Cartier diamond bracelet that had belonged to Diana. Contemporary reporting said the couple wanted Diana symbolically present for that conversation. Now, wearing your late mother-in-law's bracelet is not a crime. Let me say that clearly so nobody mistakes the point. Inherited jewelry is not wrongdoing. Family remembrance is not exploitation. If this were a single isolated act, it would just be a daughter-in-law honoring a woman she never met. The problem is that it is never a single act. It is one move in a repeating sequence. Because then came Netflix. The 2022 series Harry and Meghan leaned on Diana as a structural element of its story. It used Diana archive imagery. It used the paparazzi history around her as part of the explanation for the couple's own media experience. Harry, on camera, compared Meghan's warmth, her compassion, her confidence, directly to his mother. And in one of the more talked about moments, the series showed Meghan presenting a framed photograph of Diana to Archie, calling her Grandma Diana. Again, taken in isolation, showing your son a photo of his grandmother is lovely. It is the kind of thing any parent would do. But it was not a private moment this time. It was a scene. In a commercial documentary, watched by tens of millions, doing narrative work. It placed Meghan and Diana in the same emotional frame, on screen, as part of a paid production. And then there is New York, 2023. After an event, the Sussex office described photographers pursuing Harry and Meghan as a near-catastrophic car chase, with multiple near collisions. Police confirmed that photographers did follow the couple. But later accounts and witnesses disputed the severity, the speed, the duration. What is not in dispute is the effect of the wording. Near-catastrophic car chase, photographers in pursuit, in a city, at night. That phrasing instantly summoned Diana's fatal crash. It practically wrote the comparison for you. So look at the sequence. The bracelet at Oprah, history repeating. the archive footage on Netflix, the Meghan and Diana parallel drawn out loud, Grandma Diana, the car chase language, and now flowers on a path at Althorp. Any one of these, alone, is defensible. Stacked together, they form a pattern where Diana is repeatedly summoned to give the Sussex story weight it could not carry by itself, and that is the point where remembrance starts to look like a resource. But a pattern of using Diana becomes something far more serious the moment it collides with a line that Diana's own son drew in public. And that is exactly what happened. Because Prince William has said, out loud, on the record, precisely how he feels about commercializing his mother's story. There is no need to read his mind, he told us. Go back to 2021, to the Dyson inquiry. Lord Dyson investigated how the BBC journalist Martin Bashir secured his 1995 Panorama interview with Diana. The findings were damning. Bashir used deceit, including faked bank statements, to gain access to her. And the inquiry found that BBC management failed to meet the standards required when they handled the whole affair afterward. William's response was extraordinary because of how far he went. He said the deceit heavily influenced what his mother said in that interview. He said it worsened his parents' relationship. He said it contributed to Diana's fear, her paranoia, and her isolation in her final years. And then he said the thing that becomes the boundary for everything that follows. He said the program held no legitimacy, that it should never be aired again, and that it had created a false narrative that was commercialized by the BBC and others. Never aired again. Sit with those 3 words, because they are as clear a line as a person can draw. That is not palace source spin. That is not somebody guessing at William's feelings. That is the future king, in a public statement, saying this specific piece of Diana material is tainted, exploitative, and should never see daylight again. And for the record, Harry himself responded around the same time by condemning a culture of exploitation and saying that protecting Diana's legacy protects everyone, both brothers on the record, against exploiting their mother. So here is the collision. In 2022, the Netflix series Harry and Meghan included excerpts from that very Panorama interview, the one William said should never air again. It used those clips while discussing Diana, the media, and Harry's experience. Let that register. After the Dyson findings, after the BBC itself announced it would not rebroadcast or license the interview again because of how it was obtained, after William stood up and said this program has no legitimacy and must never be shown. That footage still appeared inside a Sussex commercial production. Reporting says Netflix used the excerpts under fair dealing arrangements rather than obtaining a BBC license, which is a legal route around the fact that the BBC would not license it. Legal, maybe? But it walked straight through the line William had drawn. Now, the honest boundary. There is no evidence that Meghan personally chose those clips, edited them, licensed them, or insisted they go in. That is not the claim, and I will not pretend otherwise. But the claim does not need her fingerprints on the edit. It is the production she co-fronts, that carries both their names, that put the one piece of Diana footage her husband's brother had publicly condemned back onto screens for tens of millions of people. This is not mind reading about how William privately felt. This is a documented crossing of a boundary he stated in public, in his own words. And once that line has already been crossed, once, in something as big as the Netflix series, then a new photograph at Althorp stops being an isolated social media slip. It becomes a signal. So here is the question that photograph really raises. Why should one holiday image matter so much when William has not said a single public word about it? He has not commented. There is no statement, no briefing, no response at all, and yet the picture still carries a charge. Why? Because trust is not built on any single event. It is built on a record, and the record here is long and consistent. Every time things have gone quiet for this family, something has surfaced. Another interview, another leak, another dramatic revelation. Private family conversations turned into Netflix content. A private graveside prayer turned into a passage in a best-selling memoir. Diana's condemned Panorama interview turned into documentary footage. A limousine ride through Paris turned into an Instagram story that half the world read as insensitive. And now a walk at the burial ground, captioned Summer Holiday, published to millions. Look at that list as one thing rather than 6 separate incidents. Private conversations, Netflix, Spare, Panorama, Paris, Althorp. At some point, the sheer repetition stops looking like a run of bad luck and starts looking like a method. The monarchy, the family, the shared grief, all of it turned into a supply of material. And every time they dig into that supply, real damage gets done. To the institution, yes, but more pointedly to the people still standing inside it who did not consent to being content. And this is why the photograph matters even in William's silence. Reconciliation between two brothers this estranged does not run on apologies, it runs on confidence. Specifically, the confidence that if William were to let his brother back in, to share a private family experience again, that experience would stay private, that it would not resurface 6 months later as a scene, a chapter, a caption, a clip. That is the currency that has been spent down to nothing. Ask yourself honestly, if you were William and you had watched a private prayer at your mother's grave become a paragraph in a book, and watched the interview you begged the world never to show again turn up in a streaming series, and then watched a summer holiday post appear from the very island where your mother is buried, could you trust that anything you shared would remain only family? That is not a rhetorical trick. That is the actual barrier. The record makes that confidence almost impossible to build. That is the consequence, even if the photograph itself has been overstated. The image did not destroy anything by itself. What it did was confirm, one more time, that when it comes to this branch of the family, the wall between private and public is not reliable. And you cannot rebuild a broken relationship on top of an unreliable wall. Every new post like this makes the wall look a little thinner, and the timing makes all of it heavier, because the calendar is closing in on something. 2027 will mark 30 years since Diana died, a milestone anniversary, the kind of moment the whole world will turn to look at. And that is where a single photograph stops being about Instagram and starts being about what might come next. Here is what is actually on the record. Before the 2026 Althorp post, there was reporting, attributed to sources, raising the possibility of competing William and Harry projects around that 30th anniversary. That reporting relied on sources. It did not establish a commissioned Sussex production, no confirmed documentary, so that stays firmly in the category of possibility, not fact. What is confirmed is the business relationship. In August 2025, Netflix officially announced that Archwell Productions had a multi-year first look deal, and that additional projects were in development. But, and this is the important detail, that announcement did not name a Diana documentary. Searches of official Netflix and Archwell material, right through to the summer of 2026, turned up no announced Sussex Diana project. So let me be as clear as I can be. There is no confirmed documentary, no hidden footage, no secret Diana product, no candle, no deal, no release date. None of that exists on the record, and I am not going to pretend it does. Which leaves us with two honest possibilities, and only two. Possibility 1, the photograph is all there is. A family visited the grandmother's resting place, took a tender picture, and posted it with a holiday caption, and nothing else ever comes of it. In that case, it stays what it looks like. Another questionable judgment call, another moment of tone deafness about what Diana's memorial context means and who is watching. Bad judgment, but nothing more. Possibility 2 is the one that changes the meaning of everything. If, at some later point, Althorp material, that setting, that visit, that emotional territory, were to appear inside a commercial production tied to the 30th anniversary, then this summer holiday post would no longer read as a casual snap. It would read as the first visible breadcrumb. The earliest public trace of something that was already being built while everyone was calling it a holiday photo. I am not saying that is happening. I am saying the shape of the record is what makes the question impossible to dismiss. And notice that both possibilities lead back to the same single question. What should stay private when Diana is involved? If the post is innocent, the answer is that a memorial visit probably should have stayed off the grid out of respect for the one place built specifically to give this family privacy. If the post is a first step towards something commercial, the answer is even sharper, because then Diana's grave becomes, once again, raw material. So let me bring it all the way back to where it started, and be precise about the line, because precision is the whole point. The visit to Althorp was permitted. The family were guests of Earl Spencer. The photograph does not show Diana's grave, or the island, or the headstone, or Meghan kneeling at any of it. Every lurid version of this story that says otherwise is wrong, and I have said so throughout. The line that was crossed was never about access. The line was this: taking a memorial context, the most private, most protected, most sacred ground tied to Diana, and converting it into public Sussex content. Doing that with a 2-word holiday caption to an audience of millions during the same trip that a reunion with the king was guarded like a state secret, and doing it against a documented record in which Diana-linked experiences have repeatedly become commercial storytelling. The prayer at the grave in a memoir, the condemned Panorama footage in a Netflix series, the Paris video read round the world. That is the context that turns a photo of children carrying flowers into a genuine problem. Here is my honest read of it. Meghan may well have intended nothing more than a sweet, sentimental holiday image. A father, 2 children, some flowers, a beautiful path. On its own, a lovely thing, but intention is not the same as effect. What that image actually exposed, sitting on top of everything that came before it, is the exact trust problem that keeps Harry and William apart. When Diana is involved, nothing this family touches seems guaranteed to stay only within the family. And a brother cannot reconcile with someone when he cannot be sure the reconciliation itself won't become the next chapter. That is why a single photograph, showing nothing forbidden, can still do damage to a relationship already hanging by a thread. Not because of what it shows, because of what the record says it might mean. The grave was not photographed, but the pattern was confirmed. And patterns, in the end, are what trust is made of, or broken by. Which leaves one question worth carrying with you. When the drama arrives this reliably, at the most painful locations, in the most public form, again and again and again, at what point do you stop calling it an accident and start asking whether the drama itself has quietly become the product? If you want to understand what the Sussexes actually built after walking away from the institution, and why so much of it keeps circling the same wounds, the story of what their American dream turned into is the one to look at next,